Ma'am, with your permission, shall we start?
Dr. Som, we'll begin at 3 minutes after 5.
Okay.
Yeah, Doctor, can we begin? Dr. Som, we can begin now.
Yeah. Thank you. Good evening, doctors. This is Dr. Someshwar from Shield Healthcare. Thank you for joining today's webinar. I welcome you all on behalf of Shield, and I request all the participants to post their questions in the comment box given in the below, and we will have a short Q&A session at the end of the session. And I welcome Dr. Padmaja Veeramachineni, ma'am. Thank you for joining today's webinar. And it's an honor to introduce you, ma'am. And actually, madam doesn't need any introduction. So, madam completed her medicine and MD in OBG from AIMS, and also she completed FCGP, FMAS, FICOG. And coming to affiliations, Foxy, IMA, FCGP, IMS, PCOS, Society of India, ICER, AP Chapter ICER, ISO, PRB, and ICOG.
You
And
don't need to read all those. Those are just, you can skip everything.
no,
People who are listening already know me. I put
yes,
it up, it was there. That's it.
yeah. And coming to awards, she won many awards. Like she won the first prize in IAP quiz at Warangal in 1990, and she won Dr. G.N. Mathur Prize in Physiology and Dr. Rama Memorial Gold Medal in OBG. And she won the second prize at Quiz in Progress 2001 and prize in free paper presentation at 4th APCOG at Kurnool. And also she also have a publications on article on infertility souvenir in apna, and article on male infertility in souvenir of your Foxy South Zone at Vijayawada, and Foxy Focus pregnancy after fertility treatment, and ICER Express progesterone in luteal phase support, and special interest or cell biology, reproductive endocrinology, and learning and teaching. And coming to the positions, she is a chairperson for chapter of ICER AP from 2018 to 2021. and past president of Vijayawada OBG Society 2019 to 20, and ex-secretary of AP OG Society. And with this, ma'am, thank you very much for giving your valuable time. And before proceeding, we have a short AV on Shield Connect launch. Yeah, with your permission.
Yes, please go ahead,
Yeah,
Andy.
thank you, ma'am. Shield Connect is a digital and dynamic platform to connect all the doctors at one place with the scientific related information with the webinars and blogs. And Shield Connect strives to improve the state of the patient care, adapting to the modern day practices and transforming the healthcare with science driven by innovation. With this, I request all the delegates to please have a look in the Shield Connect launch. You will see all the past and upcoming webinars in the website. Thank you, and thank you very much, ma'am, for giving your valuable time. And with this, I request madam to talk on the today's webinar topic, controversies in ART and freeze all. Yeah, thank you, ma'am. Over to you.
Yeah. Thank you for the warm welcome and giving me this opportunity to share some of the changes that are happening through in the field of ART. I'm just going to get my slides going. Give me a minute. Yeah. So the reason I picked this topic up is basically I wanted to know whether we are doing right. Whenever we attend a conference or come across an article which seems too good to be true, you keep thinking, am I missing something? Should I change my practice? And one of the controversies is freeze all. Controversies add spice to life. And as you know, Kangna is a very dynamic person, and like her, I thought the topic of freeze all is also a very hotly debated topic. So that was the reason I thought I will look up the literature about this and share what I have read up, learned with every one of you. when ART first started, since our aim was to have a pregnancy at any cost, we were subjecting women to the comparatively then risky procedure of a blind oocyte pickup. We did not want women to be going through that too many number of times. And all of us knew that the more number of embryos we had, the higher the chance of a take-home baby rate for that couple was. So it was always the more, the merrier. So our entire efforts initially in the field of ART was try to maximize oocyte retrieval so that we have more number of embryos for transfer. And that has in fact led to the initial 30 years ago, the chance of a take-home baby rate with IVF was as dismal as 5% to more than 30% now. These are the data from SART, where it shows in 85s, the pregnancy rate was so low, and it steadily improved with the drugs that we were having, the techniques of pickup that were being done, the lab media, the standardization of the IVF protocols. It jumped up within the next 10 years to 20. It took another 15 years to reach this 30. And since then, there hasn't been too much of a change. It has been increasing, but not too much of a change. And all the evolution of techniques like cryopreservation, and the one that made a lot of difference in this time is vitrification and prenatal genetic testing for aneuploidies in the US, which led to transfer of fewer chromosomally normal embryos in a frozen thawed sample that led to these pregnancies. So from 2008, most of these pregnancies were with PGTA. And that could not have been possible without the vitrification protocols that became optimized extensively. And reassuring safety data was available regarding them. We had very good post-thaw survivals, and that helped that improve this pregnancy rate. Although we should remember with a note of caution, the first human live birth with a vitrified embryo came only in 2001. And so this child is just 19 years old. Vitrification allows us great comfort because we can use an antagonist stimulation. We can give a GNRH trigger. We can vitrify the embryos and do a frozen thawed embryo transfer cycle at convenience. It sounds so simple. So then what is the controversy? So every situation should have something good about it and something not so great about it, some hidden facts. So let's explore them. These are the cumulative and fresh live birth rates. So these are the fresh live birth rates, and these are the cumulative live birth rate, depending upon the number of oocytes that are retrieved. As you can see, once the threshold of 15 oocyte pickup is done, the fresh embryo transfer rates in fact fall. So when we pick up too many oocytes and we do a fresh embryo transfer, we are not going to get great pregnancies. Okay. On the contrary, as the number of oocytes increase, you have a steadily increasing pregnancy rate, because this is the cumulative pregnancy rate when you freeze and thaw. So from frozen thawed embryo transfer, the larger the number of oocytes you've picked up, the more number of embryos you have available, you have a steadily increasing pregnancy rate with almost 90 to 100% pregnancy rate if we could get more than 35 oocytes out of this lady. And but is getting 35 oocytes what we are trying to achieve? No, because we have to remember, although risks have increased, there there are cases always of severe OHSS. Moderate hyperstimulation is invariable when we pick up large number. There is always a small risk of hemorrhage, infection, medication side effect, anesthetic complications, and the emotional factors that are involved with the trauma of pickup and all that. So we need to remember that these women are young and healthy, and all these complications of ART are iatrogenic. We caused these complications, so we are answerable for them. And when we were, as I was telling you, when we look at the increasing pregnancy rates of more than 40%, most of this is coming from frozen thawed embryo transfers rather than fresh embryo transfers. If we split them, frozen thawed embryo transfers have a 40%, more than a 40% pregnancy rate, where fresh remains static at 30. So why is this? That's because we have optimized the cryopreservation technologies, widespread of PGTA, and we have multiple tools to check out the uterine receptivity prior to frozen embryo transfer. And we can get the window of implantation by checking the gene profiling of the endometrium by ERA, and do a personalized, customized embryo transfer to optimize results. The supraphysiological milieu of ovarian stimulation affects the endometrial receptivity, embryo implantation, and neonatal outcomes. Of all the things that are biomarkers that we have, the single most biomarker of importance is the abnormal production of progesterone seen in the late follicular phase, which dramatically decreases the fresh embryo transfer result because of the abnormal gene expression in the luteal phase of the endometrium that was prematurely exposed to this high progesterone. Therefore, quite a large number of centers, and I think almost most of us do a serum progesterone on the day of trigger and freeze all when we decide that this progesterone is excessive. How much is excessive is a topic of debate. Some consider more than 1.2, some consider 2, some as low as 0.9, they consider the progesterone as increased. The other reason is that not all embryos grow at the same pace. There are slow growing embryos, and the endometrium is advancing because of the hormonal changes that occur and the progesterone that is there. So the embryo endometrial asynchrony leads, especially when we are doing with blastocyst transfer where there is a delayed expansion, will cause a failure in implantation, although we have great looking blastocyst. So to synchronize this, we can use a freeze-all technique. And we do have, when we look at the complications, comparing, looking at this meta-analysis in neonatal outcomes between fresh and frozen embryo transfers. With the fresh embryo transfer, we don't need more data because we've proven beyond doubt that there is an increase in small for gestational age, low birth weight, very low birth weight, large for and preterm delivery and very preterm delivery. And FET transfers are associated with large for gestational age, very high birth and high birth weight. And not everything is hunky-dory, because in FETs, we do have increased hypertensive disorders of pregnancy. And the reason for caution in this freeze-all era is that macrosomia is associated with adverse intrauterine programming, and there is a 1.3-fold increase in large for gestational age and 1.7 to 1.4-fold increase in macrosomia. So when we look at FET cycles, we will definitely get fewer number of multiple pregnancies when we transfer less number of embryos. When we use GnRH agonist trigger with an antagonist protocol, we get less OHSs. We get better pregnancy rate because we have a more control over the endometrial receptivity, and less prematurity, low birth weight, and lesser flexible. We have a greater flexibility during the stimulation protocol. But we need to think, is this situation so rosy? All this data comes from small heterogeneous randomized control trials which were restricted to high responders. So you cannot apply this situation to women who are having an average response. As you can see in this graph that we were talking about, this pregnancy rate difference occurs only when you have more than 10 oocyte pickup. So it does not hold good when you have less number of oocytes and less embryos available to you. And it's like saying, like the human brain has 73% water, tomato has 95% water, so we are 22% away from being tomatoes. So if we can accept that, then we can say we will freeze all. We need to remember that OHSs is not completely avoided even with an agonist trigger, because there have been found cases of severe OHSs even without any luteal phase stimulation, in cases where when we have unexpected wild ovarian stimulation responses. So this is especially true when we use high dose stimulation for especially in our first cycle. And the unspoken facts are that this leads to a prolongation in the time to pregnancy. So in a freeze-all cycle, we are doing stimulation, retrieving, freezing all the embryos, letting this endometrium shed, and we are going to transfer this embryo only in a cycle where we are satisfied that the endometrium is good. That means sometimes in natural cycles, if you watch, you will not get an endometrium of more than 6. When you give ERT cycle, you will be getting that 7 mm triple line pattern, and you wait for 2 more days and it seems to have shrunk. So sometimes we keep canceling the cycles. So inevitably this time to pregnancy is going to increase. And the cost of freezing is going to be added. The cost of multiple transfers, because in this cycle she's not going to become pregnant anyway. So invariably a freeze-thawed embryo transfer cycle cost is going to be added to the patient. And this can be followed only when the quality control in your cryopreservation lab, you're totally confident about it. You should have a good vitrification program, and you should have a survival rate of 97 to 99%, and your frozen thawed embryo transfer pregnancy rate should be meeting that threshold of at least 41. So if you're not meeting that, then we are not doing justice to the clients who come to us. So when we look at the SWOT analysis, strength, weakness, threats, and opportunities, definitely we can go for a OHSS free clinic with improved pregnancy. It definitely decreases the ectopic pregnancy rate, but only 3 randomized trials are there. And even with OHSS, the agonist trigger is there. And in these trials, the one that had a lot of weightage in the freeze-all protocol, each one of them did a different way. Their freeze-all protocol was freezing was done at 2 p.m. stage. That means you confirmed the fertilization, you had 2 pronuclei and they were all frozen. The studies were not done for day 3 freeze, day 4 freeze, blast freeze, transfer. So we are basing all our outcomes by reading the last line telling it works, but not reading about the protocol that they were doing. We can try to get more oocyte. We have scheduling possibilities. It is a patient friendly, and we can start the stimulation any day of the cycle because we are anyway not bothered about the endometrium. But we need to change the way we practice. We have to have optimization of the cryopreservation, cost increment, and we need to remember the large for gestational age. And this was a study that I just came across in October 2020 from China, where they did an integrated multi-omics epigenetic study of the human offsprings with ART. I know this sounds pretty complicated, but let me simplify. All cells have a chromosome. Chromosome has DNA, a double helix, and it is wound around histones. So when the cell needs to do something, this DNA is unwound. There is transcription of the mRNA. This is sent into the cell, and this is translated on the ribosomes by making a chain of amino acids in keeping with the code on the mRNA, and that make proteins, and proteins are our basic cell molecules of signaling. Now, we all form from a single cell, but how is it that in our body we have different types of cells? That's because once the cells are distributed, although every cell has the entire genome same, each cell does not read the entire genome. That means it is not that, like, once I've specialized into OB-GYN, I'm not going to go back and read a textbook of anatomy, even though I have the textbook of anatomy with me. I'm going to read the topic on OB-GYN that I'm interested in. So that reading is selective depending upon what I want. Like that, reading these genes selectively needs acetylation, and methylation says this gene is closed, you don't bother about it, don't need to read it. So making the genes accessible or inaccessible by adding, you add a methyl group, it becomes inaccessible. You take out the methyl groups, it becomes accessible. The same thing is done even for histones. Acetylation, like this, all these phenomena about how the genes are expressed depending upon what the cell wants to do and the environment it is in is called epigenetics. So when fertilization occurs, when a baby is being formed with the maternal and paternal chromosomes, the baby does not inherit all the changes in our body that we go through in adult life. So there is a demethylation. That means all the genes are not, the methyl groups are taken off and they're left fresh, first of the paternal and the maternal, and then embryos make their own tissue specific methylation at the organogenesis. All these processes are occurring at fertilization, at the stage of morula, at the stage of blastocyst and early embryogenesis. And this is the time we are subjecting these to IVF, to ICSI, to assisted hatching, to blastocyst culture, to doing PGTA. And how can we believe that this will not make any difference in the embryo? So when this group studied, they saw there is hypermethylation in hypomethylation of a large number of genes that are in the nervous system, cardiovascular system, skeletal system, lipid abnormalities, protein kinase, and also one of the most important thing is the GTPase. This is the molecule that is expressed in the trophoblastic tissue when the embryo is implanting. That is the reason abnormal implantations and poor poor implantation potential of the babies is what is causing an increased incidence of maternal PET in FET cycles. And babies born, nor their sensory perception, organ development, and other systems are also being affected. And that is the reason the baby, compared to natural conception and an IVF conception, ICSI and frozen thawed embryo born babies are more prone, because of their abnormal immune system, to asthma, respiratory infections, and attention deficit disorders, and some skeletal abnormalities, and more prone to large for gestational age. And we need to keep a long-term follow-up of these, because they might be more prone to macrosomia, and we might be programming them for an early onset of metabolic syndrome. So when we look at what is, these were all different papers. So we have a Cochrane analysis of fresh versus frozen in ART cycles in 2017, where they went through 2,400 records, looked for full test articles, and used found only 4 studies in this which were good enough for the review. And as you can see, there was no blind, there was some biases in this study. And essentially what we need to do is, when we look at live birth rate in freeze-all versus conventional, you can see this diamond is going on both sides. So marginally there might be an apparent, the odds ratio is 1.09. That means it moves a little, but when we look at the 95% confidence interval, it is on either side. That means it hardly made any difference in analysis of almost 1,000 in each group. When we look at OHSS, definitely it favors freeze-all compared to conventional. There is a decrease in the risk of OHSS. But when we look at the ongoing pregnancy rate, it is the same. When we go at the clinical pregnancy rate, it is the same. When we look at the miscarriage rate, it is the same. When we look at the pregnancy complication, in fact, it favors conventional. As I was telling you, PET is much higher in freeze-all. When we look at the birth weight of babies born, one of the studies showed higher with freeze-all, later on, and birth weight of multiples is the same. When we look at congenital anomalies, there's not much of a difference. And to put a final, to say a final verdict on how it is going, eFreeze is a trial that is coming up, where they're going to do a randomized control trial evaluating not only the clinical, the cost effectiveness of the policy of freezing embryos, followed by frozen thawed embryo transfer cycle, compared with fresh embryo and freezing the supernumerary and doing a frozen thawed embryo transfer cycle, so that we get good cumulative pregnancy rates. and it is going to be done by all the stalwarts like Abha Maheshwari, Siladitya, Aripur Swami. So once this trial results come out, then we will know the gross numbers. But for the changes in the health and of the children who are born next generation with ART, we need to really think about and justify whatever we are doing in terms of health. Thank you, and I hope you found this useful. If there are any questions, any comments, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Thank
you,
you.
ma'am. Thank you very much for your excellent and superlative talk. It is always an honor and learning to hear you, ma'am. Ma'am, if you allow me, then I'll read the question answers from the
Definitely,
participants.
definitely.
Yeah. Ma'am, we have a first question that is, which technique is better, flash freezing or slow freezing?
The thing is, hardly anyone is doing slow freezing now, because most of the modern developments and slow freezing technique has stabilized. It gives that 20-25, it gives a 98% survival rate with a good standard technical lab. But slow freezing is an expensive technology. You have to invest in that slow freezing, and your embryology should be trained in that. Now, for the last 10 years, almost all of us have gone off to vitrification, because the vitrification protocols have been standardized so much more, and you get a 98 to 99% survival post-thaw. So you put in a good embryo, you take it from a comparatively young person, and you know that you're putting in a metabolically and genetically good embryo, you will get out a good embryo. So all of us have shifted over to vitrification, and in vitrification you don't have the risk of crystallization. In slow freezing, that small element of microtubular damage and all those things could be there.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. We have one more question. What are the safety aspects of oocyte and embryo cryopreservation?
Okay. Embryo cryopreservation is a comparatively more rewarding technique. That's because embryo is having more number of cells, and all these cells are totipotent. That means if you take off one cell, another cell is going to divide, and it is going to be exactly the same, and it has the capacity to make a complete embryo. So even if you lose one cell, the embryo has a capacity to compensate for these abnormalities. So what it does is, the abnormal cells that are there are going to be pushed out into the trophoblastic tissue. The mutated cells are going to become of fragments. So like that, these compensatory mechanisms, an embryo is there, so is able to withstand the stress. And when you look at the embryos, each cell has less amount of cytoplasm because the blastomeres are small. Comparatively, an oocyte is a single cell. It has a large cytoplasm. It has all the spindle, the microtubules, the mitochondria, the Golgi apparatus, the vacuoles. So you're subjecting each of those cellular structures from 37 to minus 196, and you're bringing it back. So oocyte cryo, if there is something going wrong, the entire cell will be lost and it can't make a baby. So you've lost your oocytes. So if you want to preserve oocytes, you need to remember that when you put in 4 embryos, you are most likely to get 4 embryos back. But when you put in 4 oocytes, you cannot guarantee that you will get 4 embryos at the end of the day. So unless you have a real justification for freezing oocytes, it is always better to freeze embryos.
Thank you, ma'am.
And of course, in women who are on the borderline age, who've not found a partner, who later on will not have a reserve, social freezing, because there's nothing else you can offer them, you can do an oocyte cryopreservation. But you need to remember that you need to cryopreserve at least 20 oocytes in a woman who is approaching 30 to be reasonably sure to give her a live birth at the end of it, because cumulative live birth you need. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. Oh, ma'am, I don't find any additional questions in the comment box. So if you allow me, then we will close this webinar.
Yes, we'll close the session. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. Thank you once again for your valuable talk, and many thanks from the Shield, ma'am.
Thank you.
Yeah, and also I thank all the delegates who are participating for the webinar. Yeah, thank you all.